also like to acknowledge the land on which I am, and it's a huge responsibility to be part of the environment that we're in. I'd also like to start today by really thanking Nick, Rhonda, CSI, and the entire team. You've just been incredible in terms of adapting to COVID and creating this absolutely wonderful platform for a lot of engagement across social and impact. So thank you so much. Yeah. I'd particularly like to thank my two co-panelists today, Zach and Janelle, Zachary, Sharah, and Janelle, Tumpalan. And they're two extraordinary students whom I've had the privilege to be with during my courses in India and Bali in this summer. I'd also like to really thank all of you who've joined in at this, this lunchtime. I've just had a look at the list, and there seems to be a representation from a few of our past students, which is great. A few universities around Australia, some personal friends, some corporates, and some government departments as well. And there are also a few from not-for-profits and the social enterprise space. And I can also see a couple from the teaching teams. So thank you so much for joining us. Yeah. So which means that there's going to be, the webinar has been designed to, or the conversations have been designed to have elements for everybody who's in here today. And hopefully the Q&A can, you can throw in questions from various perspectives that you represent. Just in terms of how the format will be, I'll keep going for another 3 or 4 minutes, but it's really Zach and Janelle's show. So Janelle will have a go for about 5 or 6 minutes after that. Zach will have a go for 5 or 6 minutes. I'll do a bit of Q&A with them, and then we'll open it up to everybody. So it should be like a fairly relaxed but an engaging 1 hour from now on. Yeah. So just a bit about me. Many years ago, I worked at EY, which is this fancy consulting firm, and I didn't know any better. So that was the life that I was thrown into. No regrets, but I'm really happy I got out of it at some point, and I went on to this journey of self-exploration. A bit of a wild one in the social impact space, where you really learn to be, it's a journey of humility, because in many ways it pushed me to go through what it really meant to think about others rather than just yourself. And I really embarked on the journey of curiosity, but I became quite entitled along the way of the skills and the things I had to offer to the social space. So there were a few knockdowns along the way, which I'm really happy for. And in many ways, over the last 5 or 6 years, it has really become a journey about humility and sharing this with students who I think are at quite a stage in life where we're quite confused. So, and I wish I had someone guiding me along at that part. So I do like this quote by Senge and his co-authors, which really says that it's change starts by recognizing that we're actually part of the systems we're seeking to change. If we think we're separate from the systems, in many ways, our efforts are only going to be half. And, we're trying to solve problems outside in the world, but there's a good chance that a lot of those problems actually exist inside us as well. So in many ways, how we view the world and our actions and our thoughts and how we shift at a fundamental level within us impact the way that we work outside. So that has sort of been the inspiration for all the courses that I've designed over the last few years. And hopefully, the students are on board with that. Yeah. I do have to make this little plug for work integrated learning at UNSW and CSI. I think Will at UNSW has been absolutely incredible in laying out certain principles where various departments across the university can abide to. So it is about creating a genuine partnership between students and workplaces where there is mutual benefit for both. And as academics, I think we have a huge responsibility both to students and to the partners that we work with. So, students are looking for skills in employability. Will is a great platform for that, but these skills can only be built once you're in context. So when you're actually facing crisis, when you're actually forced to problem solve, when you're forced to critical think, So creating that environment actually takes a lot of effort, and a lot of stakeholders are involved. So from the business school's perspective, um, there's a career accelerator team. There is, of course, the teaching staff. There's a whole bunch of professional staff. Creating will experiences, at times are quite tough, because you want to create a robust learning environment, and there are multiple stakeholders involved. You can, and I think at this point it's headed by Associate Professor Leanne Piggott, who was also the inspiration for some of the courses that I ended up designing here. I also would like to acknowledge that scholarships play a huge role in all of this. So I know, probably Michelle's online, but there's a huge effort that the university puts in to make these opportunities more feasible for students to jump on board. Today, very briefly, we will, today we'll actually use the social entrepreneurship practicums as case studies for what work integrated learning could look like. And because CSI, because Impact 2020 didn't have too much of an international flavor, we'll take our international courses and see what they've done. In many ways, business school students are going through the journey of I would think of conformity, and I know it's a big statement to make, but on the whole, I think students don't really get the exposure to the world of social slash or even just the outside world. So we said, let's look at social, let's look at business at this conflux, and just create some magic along the way. So social entrepreneurship practicum happens in Sydney, and it happens at the postgrad and the undergrad levels. And we, of course, then created these international experiences, which were sort of piling on to global business practicums, where there were really internship-based models with larger companies. Entrepreneurship's a tricky space. It's a fast space. It's ever changing. Lots and lots of pivots and adaptability needed. So in many ways, the tools that the academic tools that are delivered in classrooms or through workshops are really meant to be applied. They can't just be learned and given out. The exams, the assessments are all built around client work, are built around project work, to enhance those employability skills. Yeah. And because we throw the word social over there, there's a huge need by not-for-profits, by social enterprises, by for-purpose companies, where we're usually strapped for resources. And this was a bit of my journey as well, before I came into UNSW. And you've got students at one end who are really craving to apply their skills employably, but also there are a lot of students that come in with really genuine intentions of making the world a better place, but just don't know how. So that's what we ended up creating, and it's quite a successful. I'm also aware that there's a teaching team from the Sydney course on this. So I have to acknowledge that a lot of the tools that I have used in India and Bali have, in many ways, come from my learnings from the Sydney course. So what was different about India and Bali? Is the context. For a few of us who are a bit older in the room, we would realize and appreciate and look back in life and say that really we've been thrown, our major learnings in life have come through being thrown into different cultural, social, economic contexts in our lives, where our assumptions about ourselves, the world, and the people we work with have been challenged to quite a degree. So for my students, I've always tried to create a journey of discovery, which is, safe discovery. Go ahead, explore who you are, explore what your position in the world is, and how you can actually apply yourself in a complex environment. It obviously means there's resilience, and at the end, there's hopefully some element of humility, where you recognize your role as an enabler, and there's recognition that the other that you're working with is really the expert. So this has been my journey personally, and this is something that I've really hoped to pass on to my students, that we have a strong role as enablers in this world, and it's okay to actually not be the expert, but we have something really concrete to offer. How is this achieved? We experimented with blended client teams, which was the students right from the beginning have worked closely with the clients in actually building the project scope and working through the tools together, and actually creating outputs together where the students and the teams came together. So we'll hear about some of these experiences with Janelle and Zach. Now, often students are like, but I didn't actually go ahead and create social impact, did I? No, but you worked with an organization which enabled their long-term sustainability, and hence there was a long-term social impact that got created. So there is a role for everybody in this game, and it's about how you keep plodding along that with a sense of humility. So let's hear from. So that's really my piece, and let's hear from Janelle now, who was had the privilege of joining to Bali, and we did the social entrepreneurship practicum together over there in January. Janelle, over to you.
Hi, thanks Sandeep for the introduction. So hi everyone, my name is Janelle and I'm currently a Master of Commerce student specializing in Business Analytics at UNSW Business School. I'm an international student from the Philippines and I previously had work experience at JP Morgan Chase as a hedge funds analyst. And currently I'm a student influencer with the UNSW Business School, and I'm also the president of the student society called Graduate Student Association, and also a director in the Filipino Student Council of New South Wales. And as mentioned, I was a participant at the Social Enterprise Practicum in Bali, so it's really good to see everyone here today at today's webinar. So I'd first like to share my own naive motivations and expectations before coming into this trip. So as a student, a huge part of me was, of course, motivated to apply my business knowledge to a real life project. And of course, who wouldn't want to earn 6 units of credit within 2 weeks' time? And what better way to do that than by visiting the Aussie travel capital of Bali, Indonesia? So I boarded that plane thinking I would just merely become hands-on with client meetings and classroom workshops and work alongside my team for most of the time. So next slide, please. Yep. So fast forward to the realities of this practicum. This is me at the MPH waste management facility, where we had the interesting experience of segregating waste. So yes, I definitely wasn't wrong in thinking that I would be very hands-on in this practicum. And this was just one of the many cultural and immersive experiences we had during this trip. On our first few days, we were able to immerse ourselves with different environmental social enterprises. We went snorkeling to explore coral preservation with Nusa Dua Reef Foundation. We experienced sustainable cultural tours with Five Pillar Foundation and also learned how to make zero waste products with Zero Waste Bali. I believe it really was the best way to fully empathize with the organizations we were working with, and above all, it was the ideal way for us to get to know the real problems that the Bali community faces. And personally, I got to see how selfless these founders were in using their passion and talent to cure the world of its own mistakes. And after these visits, that's when I felt my intentions shifting from selfish ones to a more purposeful point of view. And upon being exposed to these harsh environmental realities and the frustrations of the founders, it really hit me that we had this unique opportunity to make an impact in a real social enterprise that aimed to solve real environmental issues. So next slide. So ironically, Bali is a paradise that generates 1.6 million tons of waste per year, 20% of which is plastic. And Bali's lovely beaches are often found covered in huge amounts of plastic and other rubbish, and this really affects the island's ecosystems and tourism industry. So it's not exactly the type of paradise that we expected. So in comes our client, which is called Zero Waste Bali. So it's a social enterprise that is leading the ethical consumption movement in Bali to combat plastic pollution. And Zero Waste Bali offers bulk food and eco products that are plastic and package free. And it has even scaled up its business through franchising, wholesaling, and also e-commerce. So the founder of Zero Waste Bali is Sylvia Rumiha. She's seen there as the lady in green. She herself is an Australian who actually moved to Bali 8 years ago. And Sylvia, working with Sylvia, I really saw how relentless she was, and she was a true visionary. And she had clear visions for her brand and her business, but she just wasn't too clear on how to get there. And she would also often jump from one idea to another. So it was really important as student consultants to kind of pull back and also organize her ideas. it also became our team's role to drill down details and also help her examine the numbers and turn them into actionable ideas. So our team was able to innovate the company's marketing strategy to respond to customer attrition and also increasing brand awareness. Our team was able to perform analytical reviews and market studies to come up with a design for a customer loyalty program and also provide e-commerce subscription solutions. Next slide. And to arrive at our solutions for our clients, our cohort went through very intensive and task-based workshops that really challenged our creativity and business acumen. And we went through systems thinking where we were able to map out how Zero Waste Bali creates an impact towards a bigger picture of the ethical consumption cause and how it creates value for its customers. And it was important for us to be aligned with the founders' goals and to actually also acknowledge the company's own capacities and strengths. And taking that step back to rediscover Zero Waste Bali's value proposition canvas and ethical business framework also helped us to come up with clearer and achievable marketing solutions. And I remember tools such as How Might We statements and also Crazy 8 brainstorming was really challenging us to be more creative. And it was also great for our founder to be involved in these processes. Next slide. So working in Bali exposed us to some unique cultural considerations. First, we noticed that there were strong religious influences that we had to be aware of, like religious holidays and also religious rituals. And we had to be presently aware of these things when we were conducting market interviews and dealing with other stakeholders. And though her founder herself was not actually Balinese, it was still important to consider these religious beliefs, such as respecting forms of nature and rituals that bring prosperity to a business. Another thing that I noticed was that we really saw how passionate the founders were, and Bali is such a huge hub for social impact, especially for environmental issues. So it was definitely inspiring to be surrounded by all of these change makers. You can also feel their frustrations when they're not able to gain that support from government and other institutions. And lastly, there was surprisingly a large expat community, which helps in widening networks and also strengthening social impact causes, especially when it comes to ethical consumption. Though Zero Waste Bali's clientele was largely composed of expats, it was increasingly been making an impact in the local community. And our team also took these into account when examining our target markets. I guess this also posed as another micro challenge for social entrepreneurs in Bali, which is to ensure that their social enterprises are not detached with the true needs of the Bali community. And last slide. Yep, so overall, this practicum really showed me the importance of professionalism amidst adversity and really made me learn valuable life skills such as empathy, time and project management, and effective business communication. And those 2 weeks in Bali also showed me how much impact we could make along with like-minded individuals. And all it took was a simple ounce of initiative and concern for these social issues. At present, in my student society at UNSW, we have been increasing our communication and partnership with social impact startups and widening that exposure for these smaller companies. And though challenging, this practicum really sheds light on how we can use our privilege and our resources given to us in Australia so we can create impact in our own little ways. So thank you very much. That's all for me. I'll pass it on now to Zach to share about his experience in India.
Thank you, Janelle. Sandeep, you're muted.
Oh, right.
I'm gonna start talking about my experience. Thanks, Janelle, for going through that. I'm conscious of time. We don't want to cut into the Q&A. So if we can start on my slide, please. Great. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zach. I'm currently a third-year undergraduate commerce economics student. I'm a sponsorship director of the Financial Management Association of Australia, UNSW, and equity analyst at a boutique investment management firm in Manly. I moved to Sydney to study at UNSW in pursuit of my career aspirations in finance and investment. But when I heard there was the opportunity to go out of my comfort zone and work in the space of social entrepreneurship in a developing country, I leapt at it. The moment we landed, we were faced with the realities of the issues and challenges faced by India and its people that we were introduced to back in Australia. We were afforded the opportunity to go through some of India's history and gain a better understanding of its culture and religious foundations. In the bottom left photograph is our group visiting Gandhi's memorial, a man who advocated for peace and non-violence in an effort to improve India. The day before we arrived, there had been a massive protest in Delhi with a lot of violence concerning new laws amending citizenship rights for some Indians. The dichotomy between what the place represented and the events of the previous day served as a looking glass into the extremes on either end of complex issues that is prevalent around India. Due to the fact we were on the ground and with people who truly care about social change in India, we could feel the emotions in the landmarks we visited, physically feeling the weight of the challenges ahead. India has a unique social hierarchy built from religious teachings and cultural history called the caste system. This system has inbuilt inequalities that propagate power and privilege dynamics throughout the country. One aspect of Indian life that is heavily affected by these imbalances of power and privilege is the education system. That's where one of our partner organizations came in to try and make a difference. Tinkerly is an organization that working to enhance STEM education within India's education system, using science kits and labs by the process of practical learning to deliver STEM concepts to students and increase the retention of students within the sciences. With the practical style of learning not readily embraced in India's education system and a significant government push to improve the lack of, and in some times absent STEM education in India's public education system, Tinkerly was born to provide user-friendly and high-quality products serving that objective. Our project was to map processes and procedure of the Research and Development Department, a founding department that since its infancy had not been officially documented. Tinkerly is a fast-growing company with a highly innovative product and highly skilled team of engineers. As the firm is always striving to innovate and is full of creative individuals, often business processes are overlooked and product research is often ignored. As the process was not actually defined, accountability for product delays was unavailable, and most people in the organization did not know who did what clearly. This led to wasted resources and time for an organization that has very few of both. To improve efficiencies and access synergies between departments, my team was tasked to identify the processes, who is responsible for what, and how each step aligned with the company values, ensuring all team members knew and believed in the process that they were following. My team and I quickly learned about the nuances of doing business in India, particularly about the fluid concept of time and the miscommunication founded in a different understanding of the words, "I will do that today." But we worked within our blended teams, fundamental to success of our project, to find mutual ground on the most effective ways to work together. The final result was a contextually relevant practical set of recommendations to improve upon recently mapped processes of the R&D department. While our project specifically was not directly related to social impact work that Tinkerly was doing, by sharing our skills and teaching them some of the tools we had on business, they may become more effective, last longer as an organization, and continue to make a difference for a longer period of time for a greater number of people. Since my time in India, I have a newfound appreciation of the impacts that small businesses can have in making a contribution to the improvement of society within its locus of control. If each person and company works in a manner of being socially responsible, as a collective, the macro community will be enhanced and a better standard of living can be achieved. My time in India and doing the project has influenced my professional role profoundly. Recently, I have developed and am soon to launch for my firm ethical themed investment options, a climate sustainability portfolio, which includes impact investing in small companies contributing to the transition to the green economy and its mandate, and development and publication of the firm's first responsible investment policy. On a personal note, I was given an insight into my place in the world and the opportunity and privilege afforded me purely because of the country I was born in. With that, I am more aware of opportunities to make a difference, and I know that in the future, as my capacity to influence the world around grows, I will endeavour to make as positive an impact on the most people that I can. Thank you.
That's great. Jack and Janelle, Zach and Janelle, I keep mixing up. Um, I almost got goosebumps here listening to your stories, and it's been fun to like relive the intense weeks that we've spent together. Just for everyone's clarification, the India course was over 3 weeks, and it spanned over 3 cities. And it was quite intensive moving from one city to the other, but most of the time was spent in Jaipur, which is a tier 2 city, where the students actually did their practicums. For Janelle, she was part of the Bali course, which is a postgraduate course, and that was over 12 days, one city, but each experience, as you've seen through Janelle's photographs, were quite intensive and experiential. Two very different outlines of the logistically very different courses, but same intentions and different and same usage of tools, but in very different contexts. So I have a few questions for Janelle and Zach, and then hopefully this would lead out to we'll encourage others online to ask some questions as well. So Janelle, for you, like how do you think social entrepreneurship was, say, different as compared to a regular business internship? And what kind of challenges and opportunities / skills do you think you learned and gained of a social entrepreneurship course versus a business internship course or a business internship?
Yeah, sure. I guess typically business internships can either be traditional industry placements or online project-based internships. And in both cases, students get to apply specific industry knowledge to a given function or a project. And there's often a given structure or an assigned workload for them per day, where they get to learn about the company culture and also how to work with teams. I guess the main difference of these business internships with social themed ones would be the structure and the workload, whereas social impact internships provide a more top-down approach, and you get to be more immersed with the founder's root issues. And though you're also given a project to work on, you kind of still have to look at your social enterprise in different angles, such as in finance, accounting, marketing, and so on. And you get a more hands-on and holistic approach in social internships, and you can easily observe the impact your recommendations will make. And I guess coming out of this experience, I personally had a stronger understanding of how SMEs work and also develop resilience and, of course, that concern for social issues.
Yeah, thanks so much, Janelle. And I think just as a nice lead on, Zach, I am really curious to hear from you. What did you learn about changing client expectations on a day-to-day or an hour-by-hour basis?
Yeah.
And what about your own communication skills along the way?
Yeah, so during my time in India, I learned very quickly that the client expectations are fluid at best. And at the beginning, my team's client didn't really have a clear picture of what they wanted. They had the impact that they wanted the project to have, but they didn't understand what the deliverable was necessarily to look like. And as time went by, it got clearer for them, although it was always an extension. It was often always more. We would give them X and then they want X plus Y at each step. And that went all the way to the day before, the half a day before, the night before the final presentation. So for me, I learned that with a client, particularly ones that don't have a background in business, I need to take more time at the beginning to get as much information as possible before starting to construct how I expect what they want. So that, and then, trying to get some sort of agreement with the client at the beginning. After that, you have that research phase on what that final deliverable should be. And then I'd expect that hopefully that doesn't change too much along the way, but I'd have to try and see what that new strategy comes up with to see an answer on whether or not clients will still shift their expectations. But yeah, that's what I think is the biggest takeaway for me, is really doing that research beforehand, making sure you're communicating really effectively at the beginning and trying to come to a consensus before work is started. That's probably what I've got.
And Zach, and sorry, Janelle, what did you learn about adaptability? I mean, Zach was obviously adapting to changing client expectations, but we had an interesting situation in Bali where we were forced to adapt. Do you want to tell us about that? Yeah. And how did you like come out of it successful?
Right. Okay. So I just want to share as well, like during my experience, it was just like beginning of February, was it? When the, yeah, 1st of February, when the COVID-19 situation was just beginning to progress. So what happened on February 1st was that the Australian government and also the university directed those who flew from China to be put into self-isolation. So unfortunately, there was a huge part of our cohort who actually flew from China before coming into Bali. So almost half, or maybe more than half of the cohort had to be put into self-isolation. So this resulted to that group not being able to physically attend workshops and also attend client meetings, do client research and stuff. And that also affected me personally because I was in a team and I was left as that only person who could physically do those things while the rest of my team was put into self-isolation and they were put in their hotel rooms for the rest of the trip. So, however, I feel like this through this setback, our team was able to overcome it in many ways. First, we became very agile and resourceful, and we had to collaborate by working remotely, which is actually something that all of us now have been doing today. And for us, it was it became such an early experience for us, and it definitely prepared me for the circumstances of today. Our group really powered through the unstable internet connection and also became very patient with one another, since there were also some language barriers and skills gaps that we experienced. And personally, I also made sure that we had a positive mindset and focused on our goal. And we did this by setting timelines, assigning tasks, and efficiently splitting the work amongst ourselves. So it still would have been the same case when we would be physically seeing each other, but then that gap when it came to working virtually was something that we had to overcome first. And overall, it also allowed me to become more empathetic, and it made me have the skills of directing a team and being emotionally motivating as well, aside from being burdened by our own tasks. So yeah, it was a really real roller coaster ride. Like whenever people ask me about my Bali experience, that's usually one of the first things that I say, because it was very uncertain during that time because of the COVID situation. It was something that was really unexpected, but it was very rewarding at the end, and we learned and took away a lot from that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Janelle. And fortunately, no one had COVID in our course, so we're all good.
Yeah.
But just for clarification, UNSW took an extra precautionary measure where we were asked to it wasn't really directed at that time because lots of unclarity, but we said just to be on the safe side, let's self-isolate and be on the conservative side of the uncertainty. And I think it paid off quite well there.
Yeah. Looking back, Sandeep, like I think I just want to share again. Looking back, I feel like you and the rest of the CSI team were very hands-on with that situation. It was really impressive how you handled that. And I think all of the students felt very safe and assured of the situation.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
yeah.
Yeah. Zach, again, you're one of the ones that reacted most strongly in India to the concept of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zach is very, very proper when it comes to time. 5 o'clock means 5 minutes before 5. But India, 5 o'clock means something absolutely else. Yeah. And how did that, along with this idea of jugaad, which is really quick fixes to solutions, what impact did it have on you, and what did you learn out of it?
Yeah, so I probably quickly just touch on what jugaad is for most people. It would be an unfamiliar concept. It's kind of like making something work with what you have, building little make do fixes and moving on. If it's a quick fix and it works, it might not work forever, but it works for now, so that's great. And, you know, due to how scarce resources are in India for a lot of people, they're inherently innovative because they're constantly having to just come up with creative ways to solve problems quickly with what they have on hand. But there are also a lot of negative connotations with jugaad. It's often looked down upon because of the type of people that may have to utilize jugaad. And that kind of touches back on that caste system and inequalities, power and privilege that I experienced. So that just as a little introduction to jugaad. And when it came to time, I learned that in India, time, I would consider it more of a suggestion rather than something that had to be kept to. And so it created some tensions definitely between, in particular me, some other parts of my team, but yeah, particularly me with the organization every now and then. And so being aware of these two like cultural considerations about, you know, being the fact that they were an engineering company, they were coming up with, you know, they were being innovative and coming up with new ideas, but they wanted to frame innovation and entrepreneurship and building things away from jugaad because of those connotations. And so framing innovation as being less about quick fixes and coming to a middle ground on how to deal with our different understandings about how, for example, a 1 hour meeting to me is a 1 hour meeting. And to them, it's kind of like, oh, we'll just let it go for as long as we need it to. So it was necessary to facilitate those understandings and come to that middle ground as an essential part of working in that blended team. And, you know, using system thinking and being on the ground was essential to the delivery of a workable project. You know, in this case, because of those cultural contexts, I really don't believe that we would have been able to make a relevant and implementable set of recommendations without that experience. And importantly, having a more subjective rather than objective understanding of the contextual environment, being with people who are there rather than even just a textbook view or someone who, you know, even if it was a contact in New Delhi, it wouldn't have been effective. So going forward for myself, I'm definitely going to be more conscious of how I need to accommodate for different business practices throughout the world, even if I don't think that they're very effective. And I'm moderating my behavior to come to better solutions. That's definitely what I took from that.
That's great. Yeah. Thanks so much, Zach. Oh, and by the way, Zach used to keep getting called Jack in India because we can't say Z, so we have to say J. That was his new name.
Yeah. It's all right.
Great. I do have another question for Zach and Janelle, but let's turn to an audience question. Nicola, there's a question for me, apparently. It sounds like it was an incredibly productive experience for the students as an educator. What do I take away from it, and what was my biggest challenge? It's something that I've been thinking about a lot because I think the biggest challenge was, so I had a slight advantage in designing these courses because I'm from India, so I kind of knew, how I knew jugaad, I knew time, so I was quite able to work with some of those uncertainties along the way. But what I was really appreciative of was the safety aspect of the students, because I know at times how some of these situations or some of the places we were going to, none of them were unsafe, but Bali and India don't have the best reputations for women and for gender, especially. And a lot of our India course, for example, had more women than men, and I was very happy about that because it was great to have more women come along and experience this beautiful land. So one thing we did was actually get co-facilitators join the course from the beginning itself. And I'd like to thank, Anjali, who's a consultant with NOS, who came along and thrown her experience. And it was great to have Gianna who's just actually sent a message to come in from CSI and be part of the cohorts right from the beginning. So I felt like two of them played this really great role of soaking in a lot of the mental health stuff that was coming along. It's not really mental health. It's more like just dealing with the uncertainties. You need someone to soak in all of that. So I'm really grateful to two of them that did that. So I could focus on course design and actually creating the experiences for the students here. I wasn't, I was happy to push my students. They obviously hated me in the beginning, but really we went for 14-hour days. We had a whole bunch of experiences. And then we had some quiet time, some downtime along the way. But I was definitely creating, I was confident that these experiences were safe, may not have seemed the most comfortable. So, and you would remember we did a train trip in India. We, obviously booked like luxurious coaches, etc. But it was an experience worth having when you're in the country. for, we had a lot of bus rides in Bali, but we also had ample time for downtime and, reflections. So I think my biggest challenge and I am grateful to UNSW and CSI for, preempting and saying that this preparation would take about 6 to 8 months. So it was not just something that happened in January. It was 6 to 8 months previously. I'm just thinking through all the things that could potentially go wrong, but at the same time, think about how do we create these enriching experiences. I definitely had that tension in my mind, which, eventually we achieved what we did. Yeah. So thank you. Great. I think there's another question that I'm just seeing. Give me one moment. Yep. So for Janelle, like how important was it for you to have an immersive understanding of the context before you actually worked on your project? Because we talk about systems thinking in the classroom, we talk about wicked problems in the classroom that solutions aren't so easy. But how important was it for you to go into the context, understand what was happening before actually starting to work on your project? And what impact did it finally have on your deliverable?
Yeah, I feel like context was very important, because if we weren't given that opportunity to understand the environmental context in Bali, I don't think we would have understood the founders' goals and wouldn't have been able to provide clear recommendations for them. And it's so important to have that macro perspective before you can drill down on the micro issues of the business. Especially with my experience in the environmental field, like it was important to realize the gravity of the issues so that we can empathize with the client and also its target market. I remember Sil was sharing about what made her start her company, and it was through a snorkeling trip that she had with her family, and she noticed that there was so much rubbish, so much plastic that was polluting the oceans and seas of Bali, and that's when she really had that inspiration to put up her business. And it's that sort of story and that context that makes you want to empathize with her and also find the best solutions that will actually put forward that cause and also the business as a whole. And I guess that's also the beauty of social impact. It takes so much heart to drive your business, because it's more than just about making profit. It's about pioneering that change by using the skills and resources you have. So getting that holistic view, that experience was very valuable for me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Janelle. Zach, I think this is a question I had asked you on the at the end of the India program. I do hear from so many students who are excited by courses but don't end up joining. Given the immense experiential value of these countries, what do you think are the main barriers to students joining these courses, and how can the UNSW community, or even just, I think, the general academic community across universities, because there are opportunities not just at UNSW but across universities, to support students, and how do you overcome them? I remember we had a specific conversation about this.
Yeah, I think, the first thing I would consider is, like, obviously personal circumstance influences considerably whether students actually do it. In my case, I've got a job, I've got rent to pay, all these things. So when it came to being able to get OS help in order to pay for those things, getting NCP scholarship, all of that did play a significant role. For me personally, it was all financial. I really wanted to do it. But I needed to make sure that, I'd be able to come back and I'd still have my job. I'd be able to pay for my rent while I was overseas and to cover the cost of the trip. So I think that would be the main thing. And the university does do an awesome job at making it really clear around the financial assistance that is available to students if they want to take it on. I'd say that would be the major thing, that's the major barrier to students taking that step.
And Janelle, what about you? What do you think would inhibit students from joining courses like these?
I guess, I'd also agree with Zach when it comes to the financial ones, but then maybe it's more of being unsure about their own capacities or like their own knowledge when it comes to being a consultant or knowing about all the business backgrounds that they have. And I guess it's we really have to be clear on the structure of the program and making sure that we provide the tools and the resources that the students need so that they can actually make that impact. But I agree that there is that interest, but speaking from maybe postgrad students too, it's more of not being sure of what sort of impact or what sort of tasks that they will be doing in these types of internships. So yeah, I think it's more being clear with that structure and just making sure that they actually get to use the tools that they're learning in the classrooms and being able to apply that in a practical way.
Great, great. Thanks so much, Janelle. So there's financial. There's also an element of personal doubt, and I would think from an educator's point, I've also seen that there is definitely a gender angle to things. So I think women are generally a bit more hesitant, and I really wish we could present it as being a lot more safer, because it is actually quite safe if designed well. And I think at an undergrad level, there are just so many options that it does become a bit harder. But at a postgrad level, maybe the options are slightly fewer. But yeah, so it's just about running the courses again and again, and hopefully, then trust builds that these things are actually possible there. There's a question from Selena to me. How do I choose which social enterprises to involve in the practicum, and are there any specific criteria that I apply? I haven't thought about this in a long time. I guess there are 3 or 4 things. One is preferably startup-ish, especially in 3 to 4 years and they've got their MVPs. They've got it's a proven concept. There's an established market. It's where they're at that influx of wanting to just scale, or they want to diverge into a few other areas. So at that point, I feel like the business school students can really add value in terms of consulting. So that would be one criteria in terms of the stage and the journey. The second, of course, is a conversation around what is the impact that the organization is actually making. Do you really have your heart in the game, or is it just a pure for-profit mind? No problem with that, but I want my students to have the experience of the complexity of purpose and profit, heart and profits. So I like to work with founders who still believe that a part of them is in it for the heart and the social cause itself. In India, quite particularly, we were committed to tier 2 cities. So that's why Jaipur is where all the projects were. So it's not the Mumbai, Delhi, etc., or Chennai or Calcutta. It's a tier 2 city. So that made it quite hard, but it is a commitment to tier 2 social enterprise, which often do not get support like the bigger cities, or they don't have the same access of support like bigger cities do. In Bali, we had a clear theme of environment. So we were looking for unique projects around the space of environment. We could have just taken one project and run all the students with that, but we said for the students, the space of environment is so large. You have so many different players in there. So you've got waste management, you've got ocean plastics, you've got Janelle, which is the other one. Then there was the cultural one where you create rural tourism. All of them have an element of environment going on over there. So it's a bit of mix and match, but the criteria I'm broadly applying is where can there be enough so that the founders and the teams can give time to my students. I think that's very critical, because otherwise, if we've got founders who are just too busy and they just can't give time to students, then it's not worth it for anyone. That's one. And then if there's enough space for discovery. I hope that answers your question. I'm very happy to have a chat with you about this, Serena. Yep, and I do have another question. That's here. Zach and Janelle, this is maybe one each, and I think we're about getting to time. So there's a question around teamwork, and your involvement with, say, local stakeholders, because on one hand you're coming from a mindset of this is how I think teamwork should happen, but teamwork is often hard. And then you were thrown in a context where you were with local stakeholders who you weren't matching up with in terms of what you wanted. How did both of you navigate those spaces and go through complex teamwork related issues, and at the same time manage client expectations there.
Janelle, you want to go first?
Okay, I'll give it a go. Thanks. Yeah, in terms of teamwork, there were multiple issues such as working remotely, for one thing, because of the COVID issue. And there were also issues such as language barriers and skills gaps within my group. So that was one thing that we had to work around on. And I guess it was about efficiently splitting the work amongst ourselves and really discovering the strengths of each member in the team so that we could effectively do the work together. And it was about establishing a clear set of goals and the deliverables so that everyone is always on track with everything that's going on. And there was also, during the trip, there was the importance of project management, which was really something that we also learned along the way. And it was about being more accountable with the work that was assigned to you. So generally, it was a tough experience working in a team, of course, because it was very diverse and the situation called for us to be more, more efficient together. So, but yeah, I think that's one of the key takeaways from this trip, that working in a team has its advantages. It has many benefits, of course, but it's going to be a bit of a challenge too along the way.
Well, yeah, for me, I was really lucky that the team members that I had from UNSW, we worked really well together. We knew the thing, like we very quickly learned what each of us were good at, and how we liked to lead a conversation when it came to the clients, and also making sure that everyone was involved. And when it came to being a part of a blended team, one of the senior managers of the firm was in our team. His name was Utkarsh. He was really excited, really keen to get involved, and we started from the onset and trying to make sure that he felt comfortable as being a part of the team, making sure that he felt comfortable contributing and getting involved, and also challenging us as well, because it was really important as him being our first point of contact in the firm, and him being one of the longest serving employees there, for us to have a project deliverable that was going to work, it was essential that he felt like he could contribute. So there were times that were a little bit rocky when it came to trying to break down those barriers and kind of get him out of his shell. Obviously, the language barrier did play a major, it had a big impacts on how comfortable he was, and as well on the way that when it came to communication, on if ever we were offending him or something like that, or we came on too strong. So those kind of considerations were really important. But as a team, we definitely created a project deliverable that was far better than I could have done on individually, much better than we could have done if it were just UNSW. So that team framework was essential to it being as impactful as hopefully it will be as COVID restrictions ease, and they'll be able to start implementing our recommendations more effectively than what they're able to at the moment, because they're all in isolation. So, yeah.
Great. No, thank you so much. And I think there is this question around, in COVID times, if travel is not possible, what about locals? I do want to make a bit of a plug that the course does run in Sydney. And, I think Heather and Jinky, part of the education team, are here. And, Heather is in fact the course authority for that course. So these courses have been designed so there's actually a win-win for the students and for the clients. We call you clients because it's a simulated consulting experience for the students. There's no payment either ways, but we work really hard with you to actually knock down a project that would be of immense benefit to you. So if you're a not-for-profit, if you are a social enterprise, if you are a company, say with a CSR initiative, or if you are just another for-profit company looking to explore how business school students could jump in and assist you with certain pieces that are in your important but not urgent category, we'd love to to engage with you on projects for the future terms. That's in Sydney. Of course, I guess we probably have one last question for Zach and Janelle. And this is my question to you as my students. What has been, and you have 30 seconds each to answer this, what has been your biggest aha moment from your courses of India and Bali? And what is it, and what is your message from that aha moment to everybody on the in the audience today?
So for me, my biggest aha moment was it was towards the end of the trip, and I had been going through all the challenges of working with Indian businesses and understanding how they conduct themselves in business, and it kind of all hit me at once that the ability to adapt and work in a way that is complementary to the Indian way of doing business will be a massive advantage to, I think, younger businesses and younger leaders who are trying to get into the Indian market. Whereas old, more traditional style businesses run by older managers that are a bit more set in their ways are really going to struggle to work effectively with Indian companies and may just decide to take their work elsewhere. So India having such a large consumer base, it doesn't need to change its ways in order to tap into a massive market, especially one that incomes are increasing. So from a business perspective, it's going to be a massive opportunity for international corporations that are willing to adapt and work with Indians to take advantage of opportunities that may come up in the future.
Thanks, Zach. Yeah, Janelle?
Yeah, so mine was more of a personal experience really, and it was definitely that moment in the waste management facility, and the experience really made me realize how much our seemingly irrelevant actions actually contribute to such a huge problem, especially an environmental one. And this actually led me to becoming more aware of my environmental footprint, and I've personally also drastically changed my habits, such as consuming less plastic or packaged goods, and also being aware of segregating waste. So I guess through recycling and segregation efforts here in Australia, I mean, there's somewhat more organized and acknowledged, and there's more discipline surrounding that issue, but the waste problem is still a huge problem here, and our Australian landfills are still piling up, and we are still contributing to climate change. So I believe it's about time that we each do something about it, and that was one of the key takeaways that I had from this trip, that to support social enterprises that support environmental movements, and to also, you know, like shift our own perspectives and our own little ways. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Janelle, for that personal reflection. Yeah, and Zach. Yeah, I'm just really grateful to both of you to, you know, hang out with you in this webinar, and we've heard what we've heard, and there's lots more coming. So over to you, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Sandeep, Zach, and Janelle. That was beyond inspiring. I just loved hearing your individual stories. It's not often that we get the chance to hear from you in person, so thank you for that. I will leave it here. We'll be sharing the video with you guys as soon as we've topped and tailed it, and you'll be hearing from us all in the near future. Thanks again, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.